to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. I am delighted for you to meet today's guest. Guillermo Salazar is the industry principal at Venaru, an agentic AI maintenance coordinator for property management, and former CEO at Iris CX. Prior to Iris, he spent over 20 years in implementing maintenance and procurement systems for asset-based industries. A constant learner, he launched the LinkedIn Live show Getting to Hell Yes, a show committed to understanding the root of change and how sellers capture that change. A 4-times founder with 3 exits, Guillermo has grown and scaled businesses in multiple verticals, seeking to solve frustrations with current solutions available in the market. He's founded 3 companies that have gone from $0 to over $1 million and is obsessed with product market fit and demand pull. He relaxes by golfing, skiing, or boating at the lake with his wife and 3 children. And fun fact, Guillermo and I were both management faculty clubbies at the University of Calgary's Haskayne School of Business back in the day. Guillermo, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Oh, thrilled to be here, Carrie. Yes, we do go back a few years, that's for certain.
Yeah, we don't have to say how many, but
I'm glad you didn't put the year out there.
yeah, it's in my best interest, trust me. Well, give us some background. What made you transition from way back when you were more in that business intelligence aspect of your career
Sure.
to then starting your own company?
I mean, I did BI. I think in every case, when I started doing BI, I kind of fell into it. I was good at that stuff. And, it was a very, obviously, kind of the very early stages of that whole discipline. Did that for like 20 years. And then, along the way, built the consulting practice around that and grew that up, sold it to Deloitte, did a bunch of business for Deloitte for about 3.5 years after that. But like ultimately the whole demand for BI changed. And so the work that I was doing for it wasn't really all that thrilling any longer. So as technology began, and I mean, right now, BI, that's not even a business anymore. I look at Tableau as a solution. And I think that's going to be probably $0 from a P&L perspective next year, within a year. So the whole idea of like what we did from data, and I think that you think back to BI as a demand, like the world needing it. Back then, technical architecture was 2 different things. Like you had like where you did transactional processing and you had where information was understood. And that was like, there's a certain thing that you had to do to get from A to B. So like the data document to decision needed infrastructure. And I was really good at building that. And so we built that up and did things like that. But then after a while, the work, it wasn't all that thrilling. And the need for it was very repetitive. We started doing the same things over and over again. And ultimately, the things that I could do that was really good didn't need to be done through BI any longer. And so, the BI work that I did probably into like mid 2010, 2013, 14, around there, it started becoming really repetitive. And so I kind of just changed gears a little bit around there and started doing stuff in the project management space, quality assurance, et cetera. And then moved into cloud consulting and did some cloud consulting work. But just, the work was just repetitive. And what was interesting though about it is that by having done that for so many years, had a real, I guess, unique gift or a honed a skill around identifying gaps in data and be able to figure out how data works. So I'd say that's something that's carried me through everything I've ever done. It's just the understanding of how data comes together and how it creates value for a decision maker. Don't think I'll ever lose that. I think I did that so many times, for so many hours, there's no way I can do anything else without thinking about that. So then and so that's kind of more like, again, that is a supply response to a demand environment. And then everything I've always done, when I look back at it, it really is supply, fulfilling a pre-existing demand. So like the hockey stick company, same story. Even the work that we did with Celesto, with Mark Jolly, it was the same story. And then ultimately going with Iris, the same story, is that how can I use technology to respond to a pre-existing demand situation and fulfill it? And then, because like part of the whole Getting to Yes show is like, how do you do this in a way that it becomes easier to sell? You're helping people more than you're kind of like convincing them to do stuff, and you're helping people achieve their goals. So I would say like that transition was really something that is about being purposefully and intentionally and perpetually curious about how things work and specifically why they don't work. And when they don't work, how can we begin to kind of like use technology to solve that problem? So long way of answering the question of like, it kind of got bred into me through those years. And now I just see data differently than a lot of people do. And that helps me figure out where I want to go next because it keeps me very interested into how I think technology is where I think technology might go and where I place my bets.
Mm. Yes, and I'm assuming technology is going to be part of the answer for a lot of these questions, but
Yeah.
tell us about how that process you or the approach I should say that you take to go from $0 to over $1 million.
I mean, and actually we got lucky. So it's been over, I think every company that we've been to with the hockey stick company, we got to about 1.5 million. That was the lowest, but we really blew the doors off at Quattro. And then Iris, we got over 2. So it's been, I think been pretty lucky. The one was the proxy company. So in every case, it gets to finding an initial evangelist. So finding a single customer that ultimately becomes your evangelist. And that is the model. So I really believe in kind of like the case study factory or the crossing the chasm kind of approach to things where it's like, you got to get customers to do the heavy lifting for you. And if you find the right customers, they will definitely do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And I'll tell you a story. This is, a little funner to tell than straight B2B works. In 2012, myself and 2 neighbors, we started a hockey stick company, and we ran that for about 10 years, right into COVID. And it was at one point in time the fastest growing and most profitable hockey company in the world, mostly because most profitable, we use a joke because Bauer and CCM were going bankrupt at the time. But it was interesting in that we operated under kind of like a pre-influencer model that we didn't really know existed, but it was like trying to find evangelists. And the time we called them mavens. And I don't know where we learned that from, but like trying to find people who are out there in the market that are really interested in a different way of solving something, that had a lot of followers and would talk about it all the time. And so we would have like customers in, like, let's say Alberta, right? Where we started. We have a lot of pull here in Alberta. But then all of a sudden somebody in Pennsylvania would hear about us. And then we had this guy in Pennsylvania, and we had all these stores in Pennsylvania buying our sticks because this guy, tripped over somebody else. And all of a sudden we've got this like nucleus of activity in Pennsylvania. And then that tripped over to something else. So just watching how like everything kind of tripped over from one to the other and how that actually created an environment that it became easy to sell. This is part of the whole hell yes thing, is that how can you architect a product, a market, a design, and get that first customer? And I think what's important to understand is the first customer doesn't mean your very first customer exclusively. It can be your first customer in a market. It can be your first customer for a product. And like getting those first customers and getting their testimonials and making them successful is so important when you're trying to grow out a business at all. And so what I like to think of is the compounding effects of your customers, or I rely on compounding effects of your customers in order to create new customers. I believe that it's like, or my experience would say, is that if you can follow the forces of pull versus push, it's way easier. And you get compounding returns on your investments and sales if you've got testimonials and customers doing the heavy lifting for you. So whatever you can do to juice the enthusiastic customer, do it, because it's going to be way cheaper than another ad or another whatever. That's the thing that I found the most influential in hitting that, like getting to $2 million, which is something that, I really try and learn a lot about and focus on, because it is a hard thing to achieve.
Mm. Okay, so both at the hockey company and other companies, how do you get employees to help support that evangelist mentality or the culture that starts to form with your customers?
I mean, it's interesting in that, like, when you celebrate wins, it's very contagious. So like by helping your employees be a part of that experience and be a part of that celebration, like, it's a good question in that we never did it intentionally, but it was just like they were a part of the experience. And so consequently they became enthusiastic about it and looked for more opportunities for it. Like it was never a case where we actually talked about it. We just assumed that if you're along for this ride with us, then you must believe in the same, you obviously believe in the same thing that we do. And it's exciting and it's good energy. So I would say that it was never a designed experience from the employee perspective. It was something that it was enthusiasm that was contagious between everybody that was part of it. We're just celebrating it.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. I love hearing that. Where do you see technical leaders unintentionally holding their teams back?
Oh, yeah. a lot of places. So I think the first one is a technical leader speaking about the technology more so than the problem they're trying to solve. So that's the kind of the market, right? And then holding their teams back is by overemphasizing the solution versus the people that's buying the solution. I think as technical founders, what we often like to do is we're really proud of our view of the world. And I think the thing that what I've learned to realize probably a little too late in life is that, like, as a leader, you don't, as a sales leader or a founder or a technical leader, you don't really get a vote in your success. Only your customers do. You can influence success by doing hard work and showing up and all those things, but it's the customer that gets to decide whether you win or lose. And so if you can realize that and own that truth, then you can think past your version of the world and move towards how the customer is articulating the problem and how and what they're choosing, what they consider when they're looking to solve that problem. Because what you think is a competitor might not be the actual competitor. Like, you could be competing against a job description, not over another piece of technology. And so, like, I find when I take a look at what people can do as leaders is help your team understand the problem, like in 4 points or less. Understand the problem of your buyer, your audience. Understand why it's unavoidable, like why they have to do something about it. It's not urgent, but why it's unavoidable. And then what are the list of options they consider, and ultimately why those options have limitations. And the limitations part has to frame directly to the goal they're seeking to achieve. Because limitation could be that, hey, that's too expensive, or hey, it's too complicated, or hey, it's too big. All those different limitations are relevant to that specific ICP. So, way a technical founder can really make life easier for their teams is don't overwhelm them with complicated ICPs, right? Make sure your ideal customer profile has to be specific. Problem, the unavoidable, the list of options, and then the limitations of those options is something that is just so important to understand so that your team can focus on what to build if they're in the builder side, on what to sell, what to look for, what to sell on the seller side, and what to look for on the marketing side.
Yeah, that's very cool. Let's talk about you for a second. So, how
Yeah.
would you describe your leadership style?
I mean, it's an open-ended question in that I like to be a cheerleader. I like to support people. I really like to coach people. And so I kind of like get a lot of energy from that. I do like to share all the credit with the people that did the work. So make sure that there's acknowledgement on the work that's being done. I love teaching people how they can be better. I get a ton of fulfillment out of that. So coaching folks and how to be better and stronger is something that I'm always looking to do. So I would say that from my leadership style, it's very much a coaching side of things. And then I think that what I'm working on I'm working on the most is making sure expectations are clear. Because I find that if I don't, if I'm not clear about expectations, then I find it really hard to coach. And then I get disappointed on the results.
100%. Yeah. Yep. That's absolutely an issue with lots of leaders. So, what's a leadership situation that you've been in? You walked in thinking, I've got this. And then you realized, I don't have this.
Yeah. Well, that happens all the time. Happens all the time. I think that the fact that the second you think you've got this is, I think, is when you're the most vulnerable because you usually don't. And so I would say that, like, in my situation, the second that something feels like, I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so I'm constantly pursuing the discomfort of growth. And so I actually get discomfort from repeatability. Right. And so what I have to do, if I'm in a repeatable situation and there's no way out of it, I might like create chaos intentionally. I might do some like self-destructive, like, or company destructive behavior. Like, I've got to keep pushing myself in these periods of discomfort. So I'm always seeking that state of I don't have this, because then there's nothing to figure out. And I want to be in a figure out state. That's what I really enjoy. I really thrive in that environment. And so I try and, now getting back to my leadership experience, because I thrive in that chaos scenario, I also have learned to become really good at delegating once something is at, like, say, 80 or 70%. So at that point, I delegate to somebody else to finish it up because I've already done my work. And at that point, that I'm getting much better at. So the leadership style and the periods of discomfort are things that I pursue so that I can get it handed off and get pushed down. Because I really believe that there's, like, things that you can do that you don't know you can do it. And let's just I just keep challenging myself to get to those periods of discomfort.
So, would you say you're more the kind of leader who's got big ideas, creates a vision, communicates the vision, get it started and then hand it off?
Yes. I mean, and this is kind of why I'm not the 10 million to 50 million guy, right? Like I know how to get to $2 million really repeatedly, but I don't really know how the scale part works because that's the part where you've got to start handing it off and getting it to different people. And so that's why like the things that I'm really good at are getting the ball rolling and then handing it off because at the handoff level, it's a different skill set that I haven't really done a lot of work in. And I would say not, also, there's not a lot of people in Calgary that have done a lot of that. Like in Alberta, like where we're from, you know, a lot of folks that have a lot of experience in that scale side. And so if I can continue to support people in that 0 to 2 journey, then I can, you know, optimize what I'm really good at and then hand that off to the folks that are better at the scaling side of things. Cause I'd like to learn that, but I'm just not there yet. And that's a bit of what the discomfort I'm seeking these days is to try and get myself in a position where I can learn the scaling parts of it all so I can round up my resume for things that I've completed.
Still, though, I think that takes a lot of vulnerability and leadership wisdom to identify, like, here's where I'm really strong, and here's where, you know, I haven't been able to push and stretch myself yet. But an interest in getting there. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh, I'm thrilled about getting there. It makes it very exciting. It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone over and over again, that's commendable. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about you know, there's different functions within the business, like sales, product, operations, and they're all pulling in different directions. What's your approach for handling that?
So managing the different priorities that are coming at you, I try and force rank things in terms of like, okay, what's hurting us? Look at a lot of things like from a product perspective, right? So what's hurting the product or the user experience and how can we make that better? How can we bring that to the floor, whatever expects anything? And then the next level is what is the, how can we make it better? And then how can we make it different? And those kind of like things are how we want to I try and think about my priorities because I do want to mitigate anything that's hurting us. Like that's kind of stop the bleeding, right? Stop the bleeding so that we can become stronger. And I think the part is like stop the bleeding and then figure out the things that make you different and make those really good. And everything else, just keep it at what people expect it to be. I think we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that, or people tend up spending a lot of time trying to make sure that everything is awesome. And everything really just shouldn't be awesome. Everything should be pretty darn good. And good enough, but be really awesome at the things that you're different at. So when I ask a question to people, it's like, well, what are you best in the world at, right? I expect to hear an answer around best in the world, and then everything else is just, you know, table stakes. And understanding the difference between what makes you best in the world, what is table stakes, and what is hurting you is kind of how I begin to force rank our priorities. Because the things that you got to do to stop hurting, that's a priority. We got to solve that this week, right? Like a bug. We got to solve that this week. And then the things that we need to be good enough at, those things kind of like drag out a little bit. The things that make us different, those are things where we make very, you know, kind of like compounding investments on. So I would say the answer to that is really those three things. Is like, what are we best in the world at? Let's make sure that we reinforce that. Let's not anything hurt us. And then let's make sure we're good enough compared to what everything else is at.
Mm, I like that. And it sounds like you take an analytical approach to that as well. Is that true?
Well, I mean, I think it's really just come down from different like managing features and conflicting priorities, right? And then it comes from managing people is you just ask the question, like, does this hurt us? Because eventually you got to prioritize stuff. There's too many asks for what you got for resources. And so how do you begin to compete and set it? And so you have to have a rubric that evaluates where we prioritize things. And if production's down or a bug and prod or you're doing something that hurts yourself, then stop that right away. This is like a no-brainer. Stop that. And then it's like a start, stop, continue kind of like mentality of like, how do we begin to like, which is a coaching framework, but like, how do you begin to like stop the things that are hurting you, continue the things that are kind of like meh, and start the things that are going to make you better. And that's really the frame. It's not so much analytic, but just experience of trying to cascade the decisions down to other people.
Yeah. Nice. You talked about rewarding and celebrating. What is your favorite way to reward both your team and yourself when you have a success?
Sure. I mean, it's a little bit different in the remote world, right? Because like in the remote
Yeah.
world, you can't do the high fives. Like I'm a real high fiver, and that's just not
Me
possible.
too. I love high
No,
fives.
I love high fives. I even say hi to people with a high five. And but like yeah, it's tough. And so like I think right now just recognizing people openly and frequently is something that you got to kind of be disciplined about. And then
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I think ultimately, like the things that I love to do is be at dinner with somebody and spend time with somebody and like celebrate that. That the commitment to a
Yeah.
personal connection. It's very difficult to do in a hybrid remote world. It creates there's longingness for that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, yeah, I'm a big hugger, a big high fiver, all those things. And yeah, I wish that we had more of that, but it's not practical anymore.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. I spend a lot of time saying thank you for
Yeah.
like gratitude for
Yeah.
anything people are doing well. Yeah.
And I use the word grateful. I mean, I say it with intention so that it's not as casual as a thank you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a thank you itself could be a little casual, and I'll be intentional and say, hey, I'm grateful that you have joined me on this journey. And I appreciate all the time and effort you put into it.
Nice. That's cool. What advice would you give to your younger self stepping into leadership for the first time?
I definitely would, be deliberate about listening, like make that a plan. Listening is the plan. Not having the answers is okay. It's important to just take a beat, listen, process, and then determine what kind of recommendation you want to make.
Listening. I think it's probably quite underrated.
Yeah, especially in sales.
Yeah, exactly. Who are some leaders or experts that you follow?
I mean, there's stuff that they follow for different reasons. Obviously, I come in technology and I do leadership, I do sales work. So, like, there's a guy I really have come to really appreciate, and I've had a chance to meet him a bunch, Rob Snyder. He's got a newsletter called Reframe, and his book he's got coming in July called Pull. I love his stuff. Dan Martell, really good from a time management perspective.
Hmm.
Dan Sullivan and I talk about all the time in terms of entrepreneurialism, in terms of operational excellence. I like Gino Wickman for traction and EOS. The stuff that I listen to, I mean, and then of course, I really like what comes out of A16 or Andreessen Horowitz in terms of technology and where the future's going. Those are kind of the ones that I make a point of reading all the time. And
Hmm.
then there's industry stuff that I really learn a lot from that I have to read. And
Yeah.
I would say those are the newsletters I open up the most. I've been listening to A16Z, like Andreessen Horowitz, and their newsletter, I bet for maybe 7 or 8 years of reading it from that VC firm. So I really, really appreciate the stuff that they put out.
Cool. Thanks for the recommendations. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. What is something you're really proud of, a proud accomplishment?
I mean, my kids are awesome. And so we're
Yeah.
lucky with that, right? So it's hard not to talk about your kids. We've got three that are our oldest is graduating university, my middle is second year, my youngest is in grade 11. And so I would say, and I can't even claim even partial credit for that. A lot of that goes to my wife. She's done the local heavy lifting there. So we're pretty lucky with that. I think that the thing that, I mean, but in terms of personal credit, I think that I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years on myself and just trying to figure out who I am and what I want to be. Like a quasi, I don't know, call it a midlife crisis, but it's certainly a midlife reckoning around what I want
Okay.
to do with the rest of my life. And I think that I'm pretty proud of the fact that I have begun to understand what I'm uniquely good at, and that took a lot of work. In addition, I've taken a lot of time to figure out and invest in connecting with other people. And I think and then the third one, which I think has been really helpful with kind of like the technology changes we've seen in the last few years, is just writing more and getting my thoughts out there and having those all kind of like just take all the noise out of my head and put it out there. So those are
Hmm.
credit I'll take personally. Things I'm most proud about is my kids, and I'm really, I think that given the time that it took to understand what I'm uniquely good at, I'm really excited about or proud of all things that I've accomplished over my career and my life. And I didn't really take credit for that before. I was kind of almost embarrassed about it. And
Mm.
I would say now I'm pretty, because I've had to do the work to figure out what I'm good at. I understand, proud is such a bad word, but I'm
Yeah.
really appreciative of the outcomes that I've been able to realize and the people I've been able to work with and the resources that I've been able to have access to.
Hmm. Why don't you share also what you're working on now? Because you very
Yeah.
recently joined Venero.
Very Venderu, yeah. So I joined Venderu, well, technically a week ago or a week and a half ago. So one of the things that in this journey of self-discovery, of realizing kind of what I want to do and how I want to returns I want to seek, I kind of came across this awareness that what I was doing wasn't going to give me the 10x returns that I was seeking to get. I'd kind of gotten myself into a job, and I'm not really good at jobs. And so what I wanted to do is begin to dig in more practically and more hands-on from an agentic AI perspective, and really not having a ton of, I mean, I don't think anyone has a ton of experience in it, but beginning to understand what it means and how it can have an impact on the world. and how it could be applied. So to do that, I could create a company, but I'm kind of tired of that for now. And I really want to work on this 10 million to 50 million skill set. So
Hmm.
the opportunity to join a company as an industry principal in the sales role, do selling that I'd love to do, and then and start building out capacity and capabilities around 10 to 50 million so that I can start learning what that looks and feels like, with the hope that after this part of my chapter of my life, I'll be able to capitalize that and have like an end to end from a 0 to 50 million experience, which I can then commercialize and figure all that out when that opportunity occurs, or if that occurs. But ultimately, the exciting part about Vendaroo is that, in the spirit of like, we talk about product matrices, right? So like there's a whole theory of like you can go to new customers or you can go to new markets, new customers or new products. And it's hard to do. You can either do new products, same market, or new customers, new products, but you can't go new products, new market. And so how can I achieve these goals of learning about agentic, learning about revenue growth and scaling, and do it within kind of the new market, the market that I'm in? And so I got the opportunity to join this company, and I'm thrilled about it. I'm so as I learn more about the technology, I'm just marvel at how clever they put together this stack, and begin to activate the problem that I'm solving hasn't changed. The people I'm solving it for hasn't changed, which is a great position to come from because it's kind of like same customers, but the product that I'm deploying is different. And so I'm able to take my understanding, my notoriety, the momentum I've gained in the market, and then apply it to a different product for the same, and maybe the same problem, to a different product, which is going to, in my mind, going to solve the problem that I'm passionate about at a 10x, a tenfold. And so for me to move over to Vendaroo, it really was about recognizing that there's an opportunity to serve more people with greater returns out to those people, and do it within the same market, so I can begin to learn these things that I want to learn.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm so
I'm
excited for you.
pretty excited. Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm very excited. So now to
Yeah.
your question earlier, like, what do you feel about when you don't get it? Well, I've done the same job for like 8 years, and now I've got to like rethink about it again. But when I think about every single consulting engagement I've ever done, there's always this
Hmm.
period of time where you're like, really don't know why you're here, and you don't know what
Yeah.
you're trying to deliver. And so those kind of like, it's that period, that moment where you just have a bit of discomfort as you're trying to figure out and find your footing. But then, that's kind of what I'm good at, is figuring out, finding my footing, and
Hmm.
then getting that to ramp. So I just gotta, that's kind of like my personal, the personal gaps that I've come to understood, or things I want to achieve and where I want to get to, are very achievable with this new company. So that's part of what I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very exciting. Well, what else would you like to share with the community, knowing that we have new leaders and potentially founders who are
Yeah.
managing teams? What would you like them to know?
I mean, I think there's something exciting about what's happening in the world today around technology, and I really believe sales itself is transforming. I
Hmm.
really think that, like, we as sellers and founders, we spend a lot of time like trying to tell people what to do, and I I don't think it's necessary anymore. I don't think it's valuable anymore. I think it's not a very good return on time. I really hope that sellers, founders, people who are out there in the world seek to figure out the problems that people are actively trying to solve. Your solution might fit different. I mean, here's a great example, right? So this goes back 100 years. So Thomas Edison invents the gramophone, right? And the gramophone was like, in his initial concept of the problem is it was going to solve, was that people could press a record of a sermon and they would listen to a sermon on the gramophone. And that's what it was supposed to do. The problem it was designed to solve was that
Hmm.
you'd be able to re-listen to a sermon that you missed, or wanted to listen to. That was a problem it was intended to solve. But then, it came out, and then jazz came out, and whatever, big band, all this stuff kind of came over. And and Edison obviously didn't like shut her down. Like, he began to understand that it solved a different problem. And so you think about the, and yeah, you can't call that a pivot, right? That's a pull. He was pulled into that market because the gramophone served a greater number of people that had a greater demand for something that he had intentionally designed it for. Fast forward to today, a lot of the ideas that we have right now, a lot of the sales motions we do right now are revolve around what we think someone else should do. In that case, the sermons on a record, and it's not what the market wants to do. And so listen to the market, listen to your customers, and they will tell you where to go next. And they will pull you right to where they want to go next. And that's really the remarkable opportunity we have before us with call recordings and podcasts and all this data, and then GPTs to be able to consolidate all that data, is we have these tools we can bring in all of this chatter and we can consolidate it and put it in a way that makes sense so that we don't get emotionally attached to a response we want to hear. We want to get an emotional, we want to make a practical response to the data, not an emotional response to the scenario. And as founders, sellers, all these people that are trying to create change, we typically get an emotional response to the scenario. Oh, that buyer didn't want to call me back. It's actually like it wasn't a good fit, right?
Yeah.
And you got to understand what fit looks like so you can sell more faster. Same as a founder, understand what fit looks like so you can sell more faster. Because if you don't sell, you're going to die. And that's the part that I think is really a shame about for all the companies, many companies that I've seen, is that they just don't figure out the fact that you got to sell the right thing to the right person at the right time. And that's what it's all about. It's not about convincing someone about your view of the world.
Amen. That was well said. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Guillermo, for everything that you've shared today. I think it was a really important conversation about and really vulnerable. So I appreciate you sharing everything that you did. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for hosting. Appreciate it. Love the show.
Yeah. And thanks for everyone for listening. Wherever you lead with engagement. We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.